The city of Detroit, where, Rick Snyder, the governor of Michigan, basically fired the democracy, said the elected officials have no more power, we're going to appoint a little dictator. This after the people of Michigan passed a statewide ballot initiative, saying you can't do that, and then so they had to take down the original law that authorized that. So Snyder and his buddies brought back a new law to do that. And the Detroit Art Institute right now, which has an extraordinary art collection. Louise and I used to go there every Sunday when we lived in Detroit. SRF held Sunday services there. We'd go for those, and then we'd wander around the Art Institute. It was just an incredible place. They've hired Christie's to come appraise their the value of their collection. This is sort of like what happened in Benton Harbor, another poor community. There was, it's right next door to St. Joe, which is a very rich white community. Benton Harbor is a poor black community. They're on opposite sides of a river, and they're both on Lake Michigan on the other side of the state. And when Benton Harbor was failing, there was a park that in 1909, as I recall, had been given to the city of Benton Harbor by a very wealthy family. It was lakeside land worth a lot of money. And the family gave it to the city in memorial of their daughter who had died in childhood, on the condition that it be kept a public park forever. But when the emergency manager came in, they said, screw that, we can make some money on this. They sold it to the golf course next door to it, which was able to expand this all the way up to the lake and thus increase the value of the golf course. And it's a golf course that pretty much services nobody but the white folks from the rich suburb. So here we have this privatization steamroller going on. And one of the groups that thinks this is just a fine idea is the Reason Foundation, reason.org. And with us is Len Gilroy, the Director of Government Reform at the Reason Foundation, editor of Reason's annual report on privatization. And I'm guessing that's more of a cheerleading report than a condemnatory report. Len, welcome.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
First of all, am I wrong about anything I've said so far?
Well, I think you're wrong in the sense that it seems like you may be blaming privatization for some of the fiscal woes that cities are having.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm saying that this is disaster capitalism. This is, capitalism from time to time fails, and when it fails, it provides opportunities for predators. And we had this failure of capitalism in 2008, the crash. And these cities were not collecting enough money. And as they've deindustrialized, they're collecting less and less. Detroit's a classic example of that. That has nothing to do with privatization. But the cities have these things called the commons, water supplies, septic supplies, power systems in many cases, libraries, art museums, public parks. And the libertarian perspective on those things, correct me if I'm misrepresenting you, is that the city has no business having those things. Those should all be in the hands of billionaires.
Well, I think that's a mischaracterization, Tom.
How would you characterize it?
Well, I would characterize it by saying the libertarians are focused on limited governments that essentially focus on a few core things and let the private sector handle the scope of other things that are not core priorities of government.
How is that different than what I just said?
Well, I mean, you mentioned it as sort of putting it in the hands of billionaires. But
right.
I could point to so many well, let me finish. I could point to so many examples of situations on things that you mentioned. For example, parks, libraries, other types of amenities that cities are used to having, in which one of the ways that cities have gone about trying to preserve those assets for the public good is by tapping the private sector through nonprofits and other types of arrangements to have the private sector come in and essentially rescue some of these amenities because of the fiscal management or mismanagement that's going on among the policymakers is sort of streaming funds away from those priorities and mismanaging those funds.
So when a city mismanages their funds, to use your characterization, or when capitalism fails, to use mine, either case, you think it's a good thing that the billionaires are brought in to scoop up these properties and quote, rescue them?
I think it's a good thing when cities strategically tap the private sector to do things and to keep assets open to the public. when the private sector has shown.
But once the private sector has a park, I mean, in the case of the park in Benton Harbor, the private sector took that park and, multimillionaire family and business and took that park and said, okay, now in order to get on here, you got to pay a couple $100 a year to be a member of our country club.
Well, I could also throw out number of examples of public parks that were turned over to nonprofits and community associations to keep open and to keep healthy. A big example of that would be Central Park in New York City that everybody's familiar with, which was essentially run into the ground under the city's operation, but it's become a thriving asset under a nonprofit conservancy management approach.
But that's not what I'm talking about. That's not real privatization. Nonprofits are government subsidized.
If you're trying to define privatization as only being a situation in which billionaire corporations come into play or other types of boogeymen, then I think you're fundamentally misreading the full scope of what the private sector is doing out there.
Why should the private sector play any role at all in having, managing, or owning parks or libraries or police departments, fire departments, prisons, water systems, septic systems? These are things that are natural monopolies. Why should any community give these things over to corporations and billionaires for any reason? Why?
Well, one of the main reasons that you see cities and states and every level of government doing this is because the private sector has shown over decades of experience, sometimes even centuries of experience, that they can actually run these things. And they can do them at a lower cost and at a higher quality of service. Now,
Yosemite has been doing fine. We've got parks all over the United States that have been well managed. It seems that, absent that what you're saying is true when you have Republicans in charge who cut the funding to these kind of programs or make it impossible to raise taxes on rich people to pay for these kind of programs. But historically, America has not done that. Historically, America has done very well taking care of her parks and her libraries.
Well, actually, that's fundamentally wrong. I mean, just on the issue of parks themselves, many parks out there are being strapped as cities and states and other levels of government are pouring funds into, other.
No, I get it. For the last 32 years, you're absolutely right. I mean, ever since Reaganomics started and the destruction of the American middle class began, and this massive transfer of wealth from working people to very, very wealthy people began. Things were, our parks were fine in the 60s. I can tell you I was there. But they're certainly not now. I agree with you.
Well, Tom, I can tell you that, first of all, you framed this as being some sort of, right-wing or conservative type of thing.
I think it is.
But I think you're wrong. I mean, if you actually look at the actual experience out there, you have policymakers of every possible political stripe in this country and around the world at every level of government. People like Ed Rendell in Pennsylvania, who was former mayor of Philadelphia, former governor.
So you find a few sellout Democrats. These are not progressives, and these are not people who are, at least with regard to that policy.
Well, but you framed it as a political issue. You framed it as a...
I framed it as a libertarian issue.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think if you look out there, you will see sensible policymakers of all political stripes, Republicans, Democrats, and everywhere on the spectrum in between, that will realize that there can be major efficiencies to be gained, that they can free up resources for other uses in the public sector.
Okay, got it. Glenn, we're out of time. Glenn Gilroy, hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Glenn Gilroy, Director of Government Reform at the Reason Foundation. Reason.org is the website. Thank you, Glenn.
All right, thank you, Tom.